And so the Mayans and the Peruvians, they're all featuring in archaeological sort of significance. And I think much of it is overblown. Mayans were the end of the world and their own cycle and all this stuff. And now we have a 5,000 year city that's in Peru. And I don't think that this is true because the world is only about 6,200 years old. And 5,000 years ago, that's before the flood. Now, the flood has altered the landscape drastically and significantly. Before the flood, and even the Garden of Eden, although my understanding is that God took the Garden of Eden from earth and took it to heaven, because you remember there is that tree on which grew a fruit. If eaten, one acquired eternal life. And after Adam and Eve sinned, God had an angel there with a flaming sword guarding it. Now, the flood altered things in that water came from, all the water was in one place. So it was like a lake. All right. I don't see it could be like the earth was an island because that won't have any water in one place. As opposed to now where you have in these various oceans and seas, but all of them seem to be connected anyway. All right. So it had to be a lake. And maybe in the Pacific or the Atlantic or Baltic or so one of these places, all the water was. Because you got to remember that the only civilization had started around the Garden of Eden and moved out. Now, people are telling me that Garden of Eden was in Africa, but no. The rivers that the Bible talks about passing close to the Garden of Eden are in Iraq, the Euphrates and so on. And so water came from above, and I think most of the water came from above because there was this deep sort of a collection of water that filtered the sunlight. Sunlight never got directly to earth. Enough came through for photosynthesis, enough light, but the water there was a kind of a air conditioning system. During the day it was heated up by the sun, and at night it gave off the heat. The heat came down as opposed to where heat rises, came down and kept the temperature on earth at an even sort of a high spring, low fall. It wasn't cold, it wasn't hot. And so that water came down, and water came from under the earth like a well and flooded the whole, cover every mountain. This is why people are trying to tell me that the Mount Everest and some of these tall mountains were signs of squashing the seabed, was squashed and went up and so on. No, the whole earth was covered, and fish died and remained up there, and over time it became fossilized and so forth. So that's the explanation for that. But people were living at the lower level. Now I don't know how low. And wherever we're living, I mean the world was one country. You could walk all around the world because it was just as if these are mountains that we're living on now. North America is a mountain. Puerto Rico is a mountain top, and so on. And so when the water was lower, the whole world was connected and people walked wherever they went, but of course everybody was drowned since, the flood came and killed everything. And so to say that this city existed before the flood and so high is kind of like impossible. They would be living at lower levels. And you got to remember that even high elevations now, there's a kind of scarcity of oxygen and there are a whole bunch of problems. You can imagine when the water level was lower, and perhaps since the water was one place, maybe it was in Asia or somewhere else. So the whole of Puerto Rico was a total island and was connected to, wherever. So that nobody is going to come from way down low where is the oxygen and come so high up where there's no oxygen and live up there. They can't live up there and work hard and all that kind of stuff. So this is just, I think it's a city that existed, long time ago, but not 5,000 years ago. And the question though is that when people live lower down, mile lower, I'm not sure, but Just as how you see a mountain above the earth, just so um, when people were living lower down, Puerto Rico was looking like a mountain, Barbados was a mountain, Trinidad was a mountain, Grenada was a mountain. All these are just mountain tops now, but the whole mountain was seen, and so on. And I don't think that then living lower meant that we living higher, we having less um, pressure on the earth, or more pressure, because the water that was on top was pressing down on the air, and so it seems to me that at where they were on that low level, they had more sort of pressure, atmospheric pressure. But since the water came from above, it got lighter up there, and we're living higher. The pressure that would have existed if it were that the water came down and went somewhere else, just as how light it would feel way down there, it's the same light we would feel up here as we're living higher. But it's lighter, I think, than how it was lower because of the water that was up there. But now there's no water, we're living higher. I think sea level, the atmospheric pressure is a lot less than how it had been way back then. And then it's going to bring question to mind whether longevity is also aided by significant pressure on the body. I don't know. I'm going to ask Jesus when I see him about that. But there was more pressure back then. And I know, of course, that it was a genetic thing in which Adam, although he lived with worry and he died earlier than Methuselah, he should have lived the longest because he came from God's hand and he was the original. He had all the potential. He should have lived longest, but he was worrying about the things that he had created, set in motion by eating of the fruit and so on. He and he, death of his son Abel, and Cain, and then having sex with other creatures and changing from giants and stalwarts into some little pygmies and some little funny looking people, different colors and all that kind of stuff. All that bothered him, and so he died at 932 or something like that, and Methuselah made 950 plus. So this Peruvian city never existed 5,000 years ago. The land was there, of course, but it wasn't occupied because to get up there it would have been kind of difficult, and living at those high altitudes would have not been possible because of the oxygen would have been lower.